Thanks for coming, sticking around here. I know it's summertime and you all have a lot of other things to do, but appreciate you sitting here and listening. I'm going to share my story a little bit. Dealing with adversity, like most of you know me, I'm Todd Hillegass, and I went through an amputation of my right leg 3 years ago, actually on July 7th of 2022. And what I want to talk about are really the 5 key things that helped me get through that amputation. And earlier this year, I surpassed 3 million steps on my prosthetic leg. And I'm going to talk, no, please don't clap. What I'm going to share is really the 5 key things that enabled me to get to that point. And a lot of you, most of you, probably all of you had a hand in that. So I want to, 5 real key things for me were hope, perseverance, courage, the sacraments, and prayer. So I want to start off with a little story. On July 7th of 2022, I go to the pre-op room. I've been in the hospital almost 3 weeks, went through 5 surgeries after I'd been admitted to Montefiore Hospital in late June. I had a failed surgery at Mercy Hospital for an open wound that had taken place behind my right knee, and I had plastic surgery and right before Memorial Day of that, a few months prior to that, or a month and a half prior to that, and that failed. And then I was admitted into Montefiore late June. And I had 5 additional surgeries, clean-out surgeries. I had a blood clot to remove that. And then the morning of July 7th, I had to have my leg amputated. And I went down to the pre-op room. The anesthesiologist came in, and he administered a nerve block and got me prepped. He had a bunch of nurses in and out. And Heidi and Jonah, Izzy, and Noah are sitting there with me, and they came in and sat with me, just waiting to be taken to the OR. And through the curtain, it's a bigger room, so there's curtains all around. So this guy peeks his head through the curtain. He's all dressed, ready for surgery, and he said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Tunis. I'm the plastic surgeon that's going to be leading your surgery today." Heidi and I looked at each other like, "Are you kidding me?" I'd never met the guy before in my life. Never introduced to me, didn't know who he was, and he's telling me, "You're going to be leading the amputation today." So I'm literally putting my leg into your hands, and I've never met you before. So why I share that is we didn't react with, despair, right? We didn't react with despair. But it wasn't exactly a great time to start Googling his credentials because the nerve block had kicked in, right? And so we asked a couple probing questions, and to his credit, he could tell our concern was palpable with never having met him before. But I also knew that the orthopedic and the vascular team was intimately involved with it. It wasn't just going to be him. And then he explained the previous 5 surgeries, he was involved with them. He knew my history, knew my case. And the vascular team that I had dealt with, right, they were going to be there as well. But it could just give you a sense of like, okay, that's kind of a little bit of a gut punch within a gut punch. Somebody tells you they're going to be leading the surgery and you never met them before. So anyway, how did I get to the point of being able to take those 3 million steps? I'm going to start out first with hope. And I think we live in a world today that is really, really struggling with hope. There's a lot of despair. We see it. And I think sometimes from my experience is that I have hope because I've gone through a trial and the Lord has got me through it. So my amputation, actually that story started at the age of 9. Whenever I was 9 years old, I was at my aunt's house. My mom and my brother and I were at my aunt's house. I have some cousins. We were horse around playing. And we were just wrestling around, and I bent my knee just normal, like you touch the heel to your butt, right? But I was in excruciating pain. And, they were concerned what happened, but, just figured, okay, I maybe twisted it, and I walked it off, no problem. It happened again a couple weeks later. Well, this time it was time to go see the doctor, and ended up I had a tumor the size of a baseball behind my right knee, is what it was. It was non-cancerous, it was a desmoid tumor, but I had to have surgery like right after Thanksgiving, and I was 9 years old. I got my first Christmas miracle. I can distinctly remember the doctor calling on Christmas Eve, Dr. Griffiths in Bedford, just a humble, great guy, calls and my dad answers the phone, and I could tell there was a real sense of relief, and he called to tell my dad that the biopsy came back and it wasn't cancerous. It was benign. Unfortunately, it kept coming back. So between the ages of 9 and 15, I had 5 surgeries. I had radiation treatments twice on my right knee. I had one of my hamstrings removed. By the time I get through puberty, my right leg is about 2.5 inches shorter than my left. So prior to the amputation, you'd always see me with shoes on that were built up. I always had to have my shoes. And shout out to Max's Shoe Repair on Scalp Avenue. The guy's a saint, okay? His uncle was actually the guy that had Yankee Shoe Repair downtown, but Max took care of me for years. I always used to tease him, he's not allowed to retire. But anyway, I went through that. So going through that, tying that back into hope, I think we are often presented these struggles and challenges in our lives because I don't think God will go to any end to pull us to Him. And so I really believe that getting through those difficulties as a kid and coming through them gave me some hope, caused me to be hopeful, right, as I traversed the amputation. The second key when I wrote down persevering, perseverance is the second key for me. And I think that's deeply tied to faith. And I can't think, what was the word in the gospel today that Jesus used? It wasn't perseverance, but what was it? Yeah, and like an endurance, I forget, it was persistence. Yeah, Jesus used that in the gospel story today, being persistent. And I think has a lot, perseverance, persistence. I learned that at an early age to persevere, to persist, because I didn't have the option of, going back. I mean, it was the reality of the situation was I had the tumors, and they would come back pretty much every 2 years in my youth. It was rough, it was difficult, it was challenging, but persevering through that, getting through that. And I would say, after I had the leg amputated, I got signed up for physical therapy, actually on the south side in Pittsburgh, a lady that specializes in physical therapy. And right after I had made a decision, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I say we made decisions. That was a joint decision between Heidi and I. I mean, she had to weigh in on it. Now, she didn't have quite as much skin in the game, but you know what I mean. She definitely weighed in on it, right? It was impacting her as well. So, but after making that decision, it quickly became to looking about what's next, right? About what is going to be afterwards. So after making the decision, the physical therapist, the doctor rehabilitation came to my room as I waited a few days before the amputation. And I could just sense a little bit of a change in my demeanor, a change in how I felt. I started thinking about the possibility of having a good life with prosthetics. And so whenever I went to physical therapy a few months later after receiving the prosthesis, I always joke with people, like, if you don't hate your physical therapist, they're probably not doing a good enough job. I joke about that. I loved Lisa. She was a salt-of-the-earth person. She cared. I remember, though, like the first day you get the leg on and you're on crutches, and you absolutely have zero trust in it. You're like terrified you're going to fall. And there's a young lady there. I'm guessing she was in her early 20s, and I felt bad for her because I'm 50 at the time, right? So I've lived a fair amount of life. I've got to do things with the normal leg. She's in her early 20s, had looked like the same spot about midway up between her knee and hip, and she's running around in there. She's going up and down steps, going backwards and forwards. I mean, she looks like it's part of her, and I looked at Lisa, I'm like, please tell me that, she's been at this for a while. And Lisa, in her calming voice, says, don't worry, Todd, we'll get you there. We'll get you there, right? And thanks to her, and a lot of persistence, perseverance. So the one thing I did when I was given the exercises in the hospital by the physical therapist, the one thing I did was I got at it pretty much right away. I had bands, when I went home a few days after the amputation, as soon as I was permitted to do it, as soon as it was healed sufficiently, I started doing those exercises to strengthen my lower back, to strengthen my core, to get ready for it. And I think that's part, whenever I'm saying persistence in our faith, I think that applies too with our life of faith. I apply that same level of rigor to my spiritual life. It's critical, it's important. And I'll talk a little bit more about prayer. But I think the perseverance is critical and constant. I know whenever I talk to Father Mark about this, when you go through something like this, he said, just do what they tell you and move forward. Don't look in that rearview mirror. Just keep moving forward. And that doesn't mean we don't lament. That means we don't ever have a rough day. I'm not saying that. There were some dark days, as Heidi can attest, challenging days, like whenever it wasn't healing as fast as I thought it would be, or why is it going to take 6 months for me to go for a walk? But it's all part of the journey. And again, I think I was taught a bit to help strengthen that perseverance, that faith. I do truly believe that hope, perseverance, and the next thing I'll talk about is courage. They're all muscles that we can exercise. And I think God gives us those opportunities oftentimes in our lives so that we do exercise those muscles and strengthen them and grow in our relationship with Him, right? So the next one I would say I want to talk about, the third key that I would say was really important is courage and fortitude. So in the middle of the surgeries after the failed one at Mercy Hospital, it was like the third or fourth surgery, I forget which now. But the chief of plastic surgery actually led this surgery. It was a clean-out surgery. And you ever met somebody where they walk into a room, they kind of command the room? I'm laying in there in the pre-op, and there's nurses and interns, anesthesiologists around, and this guy walks in the room, and you just kind of sense, you could see the demeanor of the room. He commanded the room. And he went up to one of his nurses, and he put his forehead up against her like this and started talking to her. I was like, I thought that was kind of funny. I'm kind of chuckling because I appreciate humor. Even in the midst of all that, I appreciated some humor. So he comes up to me and he puts his forehead right against my forehead. And he says to me, what questions can I answer for you today? And he backed away. I get up on my elbows and I said, come here. I put my forehead up against his. I said, when in the heck am I getting out of this place? Because it had been over 2 weeks. And you kind of start to get tired of the bells and the whistles that go in the hospital, right? So I asked him that question. And he chuckles. He said, that's for another day. We'll talk later. So that day came on July 4th. It was Sunday, July 4th. And there had been discussions about amputation. But believe me, I was fighting it tooth and nail. I did not want to have my leg amputated. Even though my right leg had one less hamstring, my calf muscle was pretty much non-existent, and I had limited mobility with it. I still didn't want to let go of it, right? I'm still fighting. I'm thinking that there's an opportunity here to save the leg. And I had an infection in it at that time. And so they're working to get rid of the infection before the next course of action can take place, which would have been removing part of my muscle from my good leg to put in there and doing an additional skin graft. So that's starting to not appeal to me. Like, okay, I have one good leg that has done a lot for me, more than it needed to, right, through life. So I'm starting to question, I'm starting to think, I'm starting to Google, what does an amputation look like? So going to July 4th, he comes into the room, and we start talking, and Heidi's there with me, and he starts giving us the options. Like, okay, we could do more surgeries. We're going to get the infection completely, get rid of it. And then he explained what would have to happen. And I said to him, and this is where the courage, I think, comes in. And I'm going to tie all this together with prayer in a second, because I don't want anybody here, even for a second, thinking that the hope, the perseverance, the courage is me, right? It's much greater than that. But, so I had the courage to ask him the point-blank question. I said, Doctor, if you were me, laying here talking to you, what would you do? He said, I'd have the leg amputated tomorrow, and with 1 year, I'd get back to doing what I love, and that's operating on people as a plastic surgeon. I said, I appreciate your candor, appreciate the fact that you're giving me the truth, right? You're giving me the reality of the situation. And I remember, it reminded me years prior, my orthopedic surgeon that did surgeries on me as a kid, I went to him after I had my second round of radiation treatments. And the oncologist said, there's 99.95% chance that tumor won't come back. And I said to my orthopedic surgeon, I said, you got to like those odds, 99.95%. And I'm a kid at the time. I said, you got to like those odds that the tumor's not coming back. I said, you're telling me it's back again. He said, Todd, he should have never gave you a statistic. He said, liars figure and figures lie. He said, so beware of that. He said, I would have never given you a statistic. So I remember that reality. The reality is important, certainly in dealing with healthcare. So Dr. Savage telling me what he said was critical, right? It was important. And I felt deep in my heart that this is the right path to take. There's no reason to drag this on any further. It's time to make the decision. And if any of you fish, cut bait and fish, right? That's a horrible analogy, but it's the only one that comes to mind. So, he leaves, and Heidi and I, we start talking about it. And we both, I can tell, are like, this is the path to go. This is the cross that we're going to be bearing. This is what we need to do. And so that's what we did. So then 3 days later, I had the amputation. And again, between that day that he told me I had to have the amputation, or we agreed to have the amputation, and the day of the surgery, I felt somewhat of a peace come over me with the decision, and I think that was a grace that was given to me. And tying this into back to hope a second, so the day before I was to have the amputation, there in Montefiore Hospital, if anybody's ever been there, they have a really nice atrium at the ground floor after the parking, where the parking garage is at. And I wasn't expecting any visitors that day. Heidi had been coming back and forth every day, and she knew she was going to be out the next day, certainly for the surgery. So I asked the nurse to take me down to the atrium. I have all the stuff hooked up, and it was quiet. There's hardly anybody ever there, right? It was surprising to me. There's nobody there, but it was just great to get away from all the noises and stuff of the floor. I was on the orthopedic floor. And so the lady takes me down, and the nurse takes me down there, and I'm sitting, and I think this is important. I think it's important, because our world is often so quick to get through things, get after it, get to the next thing. And I joke, and my grandmother, who's 97 years old, still lives by herself, would say, there's never a good time for somebody to die. And you think about that. She said that jokingly, but her point was, we're always so fast to get back to normal, whatever the heck normal is, right? I remember her telling me that. And I was sitting there thinking about it a little bit, and I just allowed myself to kind of lament and why did I have to go through all this in my life? Why did I have to have all these surgeries as a kid, the radiation, and now this? Now I'm going to have to lose the leg for all of this. And I cried. I cried like a baby. I mean, I sat there and I cried. And I lamented. But I will say this, at that time, I don't think I've ever felt as close to God as I did right then and there. I don't think I ever have. I would dare to say, as close as a baby is in a mother's womb. I just felt this overwhelming sense of, I'm with you, I have not abandoned you, we're going to get through this together, right? And that was a true blessing that I received there, right? That's number 3. Number 4 is sacraments. We as Catholics, we get to partake in the sacraments. And I think for a lot of years, I took that for granted. Even ever as a kid, I had anointing of the sick. I received anointing of the sick again while I was in the hospital. A priest came. So the one night, I've shared this story with a few of you, is the one night in the hospital, about halfway through my stint in the hospital, I slept pretty good in the hospital, surprisingly. I did. I slept pretty good. Maybe it was the medication, I don't know. But the one night, I couldn't fall asleep. I could not fall asleep. I just laid there and tossed and turned. And, sometimes, I don't know if anybody here has a go-to Bible verse that they sometimes think of whenever they're restless, can't sleep, and it helps calm them. For me, it's Psalm 23. But that night, I was thinking about the Gospel of John, the bread of life discourse. You who come to me shall not hunger. And I am the bread of life. And I just kept thinking about that. And I had the thought, the vision of the Eucharist. And I laid there. And I don't know for how long I laid there. It might have been 20 minutes, might have been 2 hours. I don't know. I laid there. But the next day, Heidi and her mom came to visit. Her mom, Lana, was sitting to the left of the bed, and Heidi's down at the foot of the bed. And off to the right is the hallway. I can't see the hallway because there's the bathroom right there. But somebody's knocking on the door, and I see Heidi say, "Yeah, come on in." And I could tell they're like hesitant because she's, "No, please, come on in, it's good." In walks a priest, and he brought me the Eucharist, right? There again, God didn't leave me hanging. He filled me with the hope, the courage, the perseverance that I needed. And I really believe that bringing the Eucharist to me that day helped me make the decision, Heidi and I, to make the decision to have the amputation, right? Because I'm a pretty hard-headed person, right? I do believe that God uses the strengths that He gives us. And if anybody's ever done Gallup Strength Finders, where you answer some questions, kind of like a DISC or a personality test, it kind of gives you what your strengths are. Mine are competition, intellectuation, and achievement. I'm borderline A. I like to get things done. I like to achieve things. I don't like to let things go. I like to get moving and get things done, right? So I think the things that I shared, the perseverance, the courage, are part of me. God used that, but it can also be part of our shadow side too. Like if we live in just that only. Mine are not about relationships. My strengths are not about relationship building, relying on others. It's about me doing things. So God used me, I think, there, and used my inherent strengths to help me with the courage, the perseverance, getting through it, right? So the next, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. The fifth one I want to talk about is prayer. So to me, prayer wraps all of it together. It really does. So as a kid, I remember whenever I first was diagnosed with the tumor, my dad taking me to their bedroom, my mom and dad's bedroom, where they had a crucifix. And he says to me, "You're going to have to get right with Him, right? He understands your suffering." I'm 11 years old. I don't really know what that means, right? I don't. I really don't. I do now, but I didn't then. But what I thought of prayer back then has certainly changed. Alpha has been a big part of that, for sure. So my thought with prayer, probably until Alpha, was I say something, and I'm trying to convince God to do something my way, quite honestly. And I honestly thought that God was sitting on a chair with His hands like this, and I'm in line waiting to get to talk to Him, and eventually getting Him to unfold His arms and agree to have it my way, right? I'm oversimplifying, but I can say that's largely what my prayer life was. And being prayed over was a bit of I was skeptical to say the least. My aunt, a prayer warrior, took my cousin and I, her son, who had he was born with the same tumor on the side of his face as a kid. She took us to Lehigh University whenever I was like 15, 16 years old to like a traveling evangelist or somebody that specializes in praying over for healing. And I remember going to this huge auditorium, and I don't remember that day if anybody was healed or not. They called out like for different ailments and stuff. I just don't remember. I just remember leaving the place, like running and jumping a bit to see if I was healed. Was I healed? Was I one of them, right? So I was a little skeptical. I wasn't healed or cured at that. So I was a little skeptical of prayer. I really was. But I want to do a shout out, certainly, for the prayer ministry here. I can't imagine where I would be right now if it wasn't for our prayer ministry. And I highly suggest, if you haven't taken advantage of being prayed over, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. So people ask me, and I'll say, hey, you talk about this stuff, being healed, being cured, and I was healed and cured. And they'll be like, if somebody doesn't understand, being somewhat skeptical, like, well, you had to do all those surgeries, you had to do all this stuff. How were you ever really healed or cured? Well, I was healed internally, right, with the prayers and God's graces that allowed me to do that, right? Allowed me to get through it. Allowed me to take that 3 million steps recently, right? So I just can't say enough about our prayer ministry. And I've joked that I'm probably their #1 customer. Like, do I get like Sheetz gas points or something because I come to them so often? But here's the thing with our prayer ministers, and I said this to Father Mark. I've sought prayer often, and it's never ever been met with, can you wait? I'm busy right now, or with judgment. It's never ever met with judgment, no matter what what I ask for. It's always meant absolutely yes. Some questions, and then so it's helped me immensely, deeply, right? Deeply. So I can't say enough about our prayer ministry, and a suggestion to please consider partaking in the prayer ministry if you have. I know there's a goal to, I think, double the size of our prayer ministers. So if you're thinking about it, don't wait, don't hesitate, do it. With the prayer a bit too, I want to say, all that I went through, it was challenging, right? I won't say it wasn't. It was challenging. It was difficult. And I would say for anybody here over the age of 40 may get this. These under the age of 40, don't worry, it's coming. It's coming. I appreciate that you're here, though. Is the more difficult healing is the healing in here than the healing here. Much more difficult. And I'm still a work in progress with that one, for sure. Right? Being open to God in my life and what He wants me to do and doing His will. I know Father Mark has shared many times, like, the one prayer God always answers is to know His will for you. That's the one prayer, right? And so I'm always searching for that. I always want to know what my will is. But I sometimes want to do it selfishly because I want this peace, this interior freedom that the world can't give. But it's amazing to me how many times I still want to go back across that bridge. I cross that bridge from time to time where I have the inner peace, I have the inner freedom that God promises, that Christ promises. He has conquered the world. But then sometimes I get sucked back into that competition, intellectuation, achievement that are my inherent strengths, but then it can also be my dark side too. Like I put a focus on getting things done, getting ahead. How many times have we bought into the lie? How many times have I bought into the lie? Like, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be peaceful whenever I get that degree. I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be peaceful whenever I marry her. I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be peaceful when we have the house, when we have the kids. Okay, I'm going to be happy, peaceful whenever I get that promotion. I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be peaceful whenever, my nest egg is what it needs to be in order for me to do whatever it is that I want, whatever that may be, right? But oftentimes that's all about I, right? That's all about I and not about that. That's been my personal struggle that's been more difficult than the amputation. Honestly, it has been. It truly has been. So I hope me sharing this a little bit with you helps me get through something external. But I think all those things that I shared too are very much to help us internally too, to keep persevering, keep having hope in a world that doesn't want us to have hope. Keep persevering, keep being courageous, and keep always coming back to the Lord and our fellow parishioners here, right? Rely on each other. Don't hesitate to reach out for prayer. It's amazing to me, again, how often I'm met with complete love and acceptance whenever I ask people for prayer. Really appreciate that. I gave a similar talk at Bishop Carroll and Bishop McCourt, and then I allow some time. What time is it? 10:27. I better get rolling here soon. But any questions from me? And I can tell you the one question that you guys won't top from a girl from Bishop Carroll. And then I'll tell one. Bishop Carroll, they want to know how much my knee cost. And Bishop McCourt, the girl asked a really pointed question, like, how hard was it on your daughter going through this, right? How hard was it? And you know how hard it was, right? Because if you have somebody in your life that you love intimately, and they're going through suffering, and you can't necessarily do much about it, you know how hard it is, right? So that was really a nice question she asked. If anybody has any questions, yeah.
Yeah, okay, you talked about the peace and freedom. God's will. Difference comes when it's private.
I think it's a work in progress for sure. What's that? Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I do think it's a work in progress. I think it's a continual thing. And I go back to a quote that Mother Teresa had, which I think it's attributed to her, is we're called to be faithful, not successful. And that's an important one for me, right? Just continue to be faithful amidst the struggles, whether that's, success with our health, our families, our careers, or whatever. I think it's a work in progress. I would say, yeah, I journal a good bit, so I've seen improvements. I've seen improvements, yeah, in my own life with that, yeah. Yeah, you want to?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to tell you that when I began to understand your journey, that you're a great role model for me about my faith, turning on and doing positive things in life. And I thank you for that. I thank you for your courage, and I thank you for being part of us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ralph. Thanks. Well, praise God for that, right? Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate that. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we don't think about is our ego and our brain controls more than we can reach for.
Mm-hmm.
And once we've reached that and can control the brain, it is a much more peaceful life. Not that you don't work on it every day.
Yeah.
And the journey never ends.
It never ends.
It's always, I want more.
Yeah.
I want more.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with my prayer life that has changed. I do centering prayer every morning, and I'm always learning more, right? Experiencing more. And the challenge for me, and I don't know if it is for any of you, is I want to rely on myself to do something. And so the hardness of my heart that remains, I have gone to a certain point and I can't go any further, is what it feels like. So I have to allow God to do the work now. And that's hard for me. I don't know if it is for any of you. Just to allow God to do the remainder of the healing. Show up and be open to Him. That's that ego you're talking about, the false self. Yeah, that's the hardest. And for us, that's the Holy Grail, right? That's the Holy Grail. Right? That's the Holy Grail deep inside that we're at. Yeah.
I think if you are faithful, you are successful. So rather looking ahead that I want to go here, you have that faith.
Mm-hmm.
You are successful. And it will work out.
Yeah, and that's for all of us, right? That's what we're married. Yeah.
What it is.
Yeah.
Just the patience.
Keep showing up.
And the faith will get there to that point. That is success.
Yeah.
So rather than getting this thing over here that I wanted, that is my success.
Yeah.
Having the faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yes. Is it working? Yeah.
such a large impact on my life. One,
I think it's on. Just pull it real close. Just pull it real close. I think it's on.
okay. Can you hear me now? Is that okay? It was Holy Thursday, and if anyone should not have been there washing someone's feet on the ground, it would have been you. But there you are. And that moved me in such an incredible way. And it just spoke volumes about you, that you had that kind of humility and that kind of heart that you wanted to wash someone's feet with a leg that you couldn't bend like everybody else could. I was very moved by that. And I think that just said so much about you, Todd.
Well, thank you.
And I just commend you for everything you've been through, and the result of all that being a man that's willing to get down on the ground and wash his brother's feet.
Can I add, I had a little humor with that one.
Sure.
My humor is pretty bad, if some of you know. And I joked I was going to put my fake foot out to have it washed, but I didn't. Thank you for sure. Yeah, I think we're probably going to get the boot here. It's 10:30, I think. But thanks, everybody. I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.